Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're unpacking a pretty fascinating story. It's all about how a crazy mix of hostile constraints, completely accidental discoveries, and, well, some fairly complex structural choices built the absolute largest furniture empire in the world. We are looking at the blueprint of IKEA. Whether you're an entrepreneur trying to scale a business, a designer looking for efficiency, or honestly, just someone who has spent a Saturday navigating one of those massive blue and yellow warehouses, there is a literal masterclass in strategy waiting for us here. So let's dive right in.
Picture this. We're dropping right into the year 1955, and the scene is incredibly tense. In the small Swedish town of Älmhult, a young furniture dealer is watching his own industry try to literally strangle his business in the crib. Sweden's established furniture retailers actually banded together and sent out this massive ultimatum to every domestic manufacturer. They said, "Supply this upstart named Ingvar Kamprad and you lose our business for good." And it worked. One by one, his suppliers just vanished. His entire supply chain was being systematically dismantled by the very industry he was trying to join.
Section 1. The furniture boycott and forcing a global supply chain. For most companies, a devastating boycott like that would just be the end of the road. But as we're going to see, this blockade forced a radical pivot that actually built IKEA's global dominance.
Instead of fighting this domestic boycott head-on, Kamprad just went around it. If Swedish manufacturers wouldn't sell to him, he'd find someone who would. Cut off in his own country, he looked east. In 1961, he crossed over into Poland. Now, this was a highly unusual and frankly radical move for a Western retailer during that political era, but he struck a deal with a chair factory in the town of Radomusko. Kamprad offered them large, guaranteed volumes and technical know-how, and in return, he secured furniture produced at roughly half the cost of anything coming out of Sweden. So a boycott designed to completely destroy him ended up forcing him to build a cheaper, far more scalable continental supply chain. Section 2. Humble Origins and the Teenager's Mail Order Business. To truly understand how revolutionary, and honestly how unlikely, this international supply chain was, we have to rewind 12 years to see where this whole operation actually began. The year is 1943. A 17-year-old Ingvar Kamprad starts a tiny, very unglamorous mail-order business selling things like matches, pens, and wallets. He needs a name for it, so he just creates an acronym, IKEA. It stitches together his own initials, I and K, with the first letters of Eltmeriard, the family farm where he grew up, and Agunared, which was his home parish. At this point, it was literally just a teenager's side hustle, born out of equal parts ambition and rural boredom.
But just look at the staggering pace of this evolution. He starts the mail-order business in 1943. By 1948, he decides to toss some furniture into the catalog, and it is such a huge hit that by 1951, just 8 years after starting out, he drops everything else. No more matches, no more pens. He bets entirely on home furnishings. The momentum is just incredible, because by 1958, he opens his very first physical store in Älmhult. The entire model was built on one incredibly simple promise: good design, sold cheap, directly to the customer. And as we just learned, selling cheap is exactly what put that massive target on his back a few years prior.
Which brings us to Section 3. 2 accidental innovations and the spark of the flat pack. Okay, so he's got a store, and he's building this cheap Polish supply chain to survive the boycott. But just as that is forming, a second, incredibly simple, totally accidental innovation reshapes the company forever.
It all stems from a seemingly mundane question. How do you fit this table in a car? The year is 1956. An IKEA designer named Gillis Lundgren is wrapping up a photo shoot, and he is really struggling to load this leafy-shaped side table called the Lovate into the trunk of his car. It simply won't fit. He's frustrated trying to angle it this way and that. And then it hits him, a brilliant realization. He does something almost embarrassingly simple. He unscrews the legs and just lays them flat under the tabletop. It slides right into the car. That small, totally practical fix to an everyday annoyance birthed IKEA's very first flat-pack self-assembly product. Think about the massive cascading effects of this. Flat-pack means smaller boxes. Smaller boxes mean way more units can fit on a single truck. That means you need less warehouse space, which dramatically lowers your shipping and storage costs. Combined with the cheap Polish manufacturing, this completely turned IKEA's cost structure inside out.
Building directly on that flat-pack discovery, IKEA then completely reimagined the retail experience into a self-service machine. Instead of paying a huge sales staff to hold a customer's hand through the whole process, they created an entirely new behavioral loop. Step 1. You browse the showroom floor. Step 2. You write down the article number yourself. Step 3. You walk right into the warehouse and pull your own flat box off the shelf. They essentially created a showroom that you shop like a warehouse, transferring the labor of retrieval and assembly directly onto us, the customers. This slashed their operating costs right to the bone.
By the 1980s, all these puzzle pieces locked together to form a highly efficient, globally scalable machine built around 4 unshakable tenets. Source cheap and far away. Ship it flat. Keep your retail staff light by utilizing the customer. And always, always keep the price down. That right there is the engine of the entire empire.
Section 4. The Corporate Shield and the Complications. As this empire scaled globally, Ingvar Kamprad made some structural and personal choices that we absolutely have to look at objectively in this explainer, because they permanently complicated his legacy and the brand itself.
In 1982, Kamprad made a massive structural decision. He placed the ownership of IKEA into a Dutch entity called the Stichting Inga Foundation. Now, on paper, the stated purpose was to insulate the company from corporate takeovers and lock in long-term patient control. It was designed so the company would never have to answer to Wall Street shareholders. However, in reality, as uncovered by journalists and tax researchers over the decades, this structure was heavily scrutinized. Investigations concluded that it acted as a mechanism to aggressively minimize taxes and disclosure obligations, all while allowing the Kamprad family to retain enormous benefit and control behind the facade of a nonprofit organization. It's a pretty stark lesson that protecting a company for the long run and being transparent about how you're protecting it are two very different things.
Furthermore, the founder's own personal past held an even harder reckoning. In 1994, Kamprad publicly admitted that as a young man in the 1940s, he'd actually been a member of a Swedish fascist organization. He also admitted to maintaining a long-standing friendship with the fascist leader Per Engdahl for decades, a relationship he never fully or cleanly renounced at the time. He would later go on to call it the biggest mistake of my life.
And you know, this wasn't a story that just faded away. It resurfaced repeatedly throughout his life and even after his death in 2018. The honest version of this explainer requires us to impartially report the facts from our sources. We have to hold both the undeniable, world-changing ingenuity of his business model and the ugly reality of his past in the exact same hand. It serves as a permanent asterisk attached to one of the most recognizable brands on the planet.
Section 5. The honest blueprint in our core takeaways. So as we step back and look at the whole picture, what are the crucial, actionable takeaways we can extract from this massive operation that's currently spanning the globe?
Everything we've covered today distills down into 4 core lessons from the blueprint. First, hostile blockades can actually forge stronger independence. Being locked out by your own domestic industry can force you to build something infinitely more robust. Second, small fixes for everyday annoyances, like a table just not fitting in a car trunk, can literally redefine the cost structure of an entire global industry. Third, while long-term corporate protection is smart, it absolutely must be balanced with genuine transparency. And finally, when it comes to legacy, owning your mistakes honestly matters far more than pretending they never happened.
Ultimately, this story proves that every massive, world-dominating empire you have ever heard of begins with a small, uncertain decision. I mean, think about it. A 17-year-old selling matches to his neighbors. So if you have an idea, you don't need the ideal conditions. You don't need a perfect supply chain. And you certainly don't need the approval of your industry. You just need to start. Which leaves us with one final question to think about today. What small, frustrating problem in your life right now is actually a global empire waiting to be unpacked?